So hello there and welcome to a special episode of East End Beers, also being recorded as a video. And this week is Reusable Nappy Week, and I'm delighted to be joined by two very special guests who are going to talk us through Reusable Nappy Week. We've got Sarah Moyes from Friends of the Earth Scotland and Magnus from TotsBots up in Queenslie in my constituency. So how are you guys both doing?
All good, thanks.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Let's just dive straight in. Obviously, we are here to talk about Reusable Nappy Week. Magnus, you have a company in my own constituency which manufactures reusable nappies. But for a lot of people who are either watching or listening to this podcast, won't have the faintest idea about what they are. Do you want to kind of talk us through what your company does and why it's such an important part of our campaign to combat climate change?
Right, okay, so my wife and I set up TotsBots 20 years ago, essentially to answer our own personal need for a reusable nappy that was as easy to use as a disposable, really. I couldn't get to grips with Terry squares at all, and Fiona got sick of changing the nappies. So she designed a nappy for me, basically. And that has now turned into a business that employs 75 people in our factory in Glasgow, where we manufacture the nappies, and we're sold in many countries around the world. And you know, the main reason that we went down reusable nappy route ourselves was because of the environment, really, and the amount of waste that disposable nappies represent. I mean, at the moment, the latest estimates are something like 4% of domestic waste is disposable nappies, which is quite a lot. It turns out to be about 3 billion thrown in the bin every year, just in the UK alone, which is a huge number. So, you know, there is a big waste issue there, but, you know, the waste is actually the symptom of the actual problem, which is overconsumption of resources. Any single-use product represents that type of overconsumption, whether it be plastic bags, plastic straws, food containers. Any single-use product represents overconsumption. In 2008, DEFRA conducted a life cycle analysis of nappies, and it concluded that reusable nappies were up to 40% better in terms of carbon footprint than disposables as well. So there's a carbon implication there too. But if you look at the actual material usage, for every baby that uses disposable nappies from birth through to potty training, you'll use about 150 kilograms of mixed materials, plastics, cellulose, fluff, and things like that. Whereas if you use reusable nappies, it's only 2.5 kilograms. So it's far, far less in terms of the consumption. And to give you a bit of a kind of an analogy, I think people sometimes get a bit confused about, you know, what's in these nappies, but a lot of it is plastic, right? And if you were to do disposable nappies from birth through to potty training, it's the equivalent of throwing 17 plastic bags per day in the bin for a 3-year period. So that gives you a picture of how much plastic is actually getting thrown away every day. So that in a nutshell is kind of the reason why we got into it. And also there's an economic benefit for parents as well. It costs a lot less in the long run to use washable nappies than to use disposable nappies. And actually, you know what? It's not that much more difficult to do, because your washing machine is going to be on pretty much every other day when you have children anyway. And, you know, I personally used to just wash everything in together. I would put the nappies in, give them a rinse, and then I would chuck in everything else I was going to wash at the same time. And everything comes out sparkly clean anyway, so it's fine, you know. So that in a nutshell is it, really. And that's kind of why we set the business up.
And it would be fair to say in kind of recent years that it's probably been in people's consciousness or radar a little bit more. Have you noticed that kind of following through, without getting into kind of like any kind of commercially sensitive stuff, have you noticed that kind of an increase in sales as people are starting to be a bit more kind of environmentally conscious? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, you know, across, you know, as one of the founding members of the Nappy Alliance, which we'll talk about in a minute, you know, we have open dialogue between all the companies that are involved in that. and everyone is experiencing a growth at the moment. People are much more concerned about the environment and the impacts that they're having on it. So there's definitely a growth, and actually, believe it or not, I think that COVID has had an effect on that as well. People are definitely taking, or they've got time to take more stock of their lives and how they're living their lives and what's actually important. And we're definitely seeing a growth at the moment, absolutely, which is great to see, you know.
Certainly, from my point of view, not only is it important for the environment, but it's great for driving the local economy. You mentioned earlier on, employing over 70 folk in the constituency, which is absolutely massive. So long may that continue. You touched earlier on there about the Nappy Alliance, which is obviously, I won't steal your thunder here in saying what the Nappy Alliance is, but it's an organisation that I've worked quite closely with since I've been elected. Do you want to just talk through, for the benefit of listeners, what the Nappy Alliance is and how that feeds into the political debate?
Sure. So the Nappy Alliance really is our industry body, and it's a collection of 9 reusable nappy, either manufacturers or retailers, working together to promote the benefits of reusable nappies, and in terms of the environment, health for baby, cost for parents, and all that kind of stuff. And essentially, we focus very much on the kind of political lobbying side of things, as you're probably quite aware of. Latterly, the 2 main things I've been working on has been, your environmental standards bill for nappies, which culminated in a debate in the House and it being included in some format into the main environmental standards bill, which is fantastic. And we're forever grateful for your support there, David. That's been absolutely outstanding piece of work. And also we're very heavily involved in DEFRA's revision of the LCA report, the life cycle analysis on nappies, which is revisiting the 2008 report that I spoke of earlier, and reassessing the comparison between disposables and reusable nappies in terms of their impact in a more modern world, where a lot more of the electricity grid has been decarbonised. Washing machines are much more efficient. Reusable nappies are designed to be washed at lower temperatures and dry quickly, so you don't need a tumble dryer and that type of thing. So we're very heavily, all of us, involved in that at the moment. And we're very much looking forward to seeing the results of that report.
So Sarah, you're joining us today from Friends of the Earth Scotland. One of the things that I've been very conscious of around this particular debate has been, we've made particularly kind of impressive strides forward in the debate around about things like plastic carrier bags, on coffee cups. Why do you think it is that the issue of disposable nappies still hasn't quite yet come to the fore, and arguably is probably even more of a kind of polluter than, for example, coffee cups?
I think one of the problems is that, when we think of a sort of a single-use plastic product, we think about the plastic straw or the plastic bottle, those some of the items that you just mentioned. And quite often we forget that so much of what's made up of a single-use nappy is plastic, up to 61% is plastic. And I think it's quite easy to sometimes forget that. We also have, I think we've seen, I guess, a bit of a shift now. We're talking about more so now often menstrual products and the shift away. And I think nappies kind of often comes under that, and this will be the next switch. But I think it's also something that's quite difficult sometimes, I think, for some people to get their heads around. We're all used to, we've all at some point bought a plastic bottle, but we've not all had experience with nappies yet either. So that is something that I think can be quite difficult for people to understand. But we are starting to make headway with that. We have seen, like Magnus was talking about, the shift just from people using more reusable nappies. Just in my line of work, we have seen that shift of people wanting to be more environmentally conscious, wanting to switch and be using reusable products more. I think it's just been a little bit of a slow burner to get us there. But actually, when people find out how much plastic is in there, and the fact that there's no real disposable options, plastic bottles can be recycled. There's obviously a lot of issues around that and how much a product can be recycled in facilities, but most of your nappies are going to end up either in landfill for hundreds of years where they break down, or in an incinerator. So there isn't that option either. But it is slowly, I think, getting more traction, but much more work does need to be done on it.
Yeah, and I think that there's a point here that, some of this comes into consumer choice, and so a lot of the things that Magnus was talking about in that Nappy's Environmental Standards Bill was about making sure that, parents and consumers make informed choices. Sarah, do you think that there's a role for councils or government as well to play in this process? And if so, what kind of role would you see people in positions of influence kind of making in terms of policy choices?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a place for government and for local authorities. I mean, you need to, if you've got parents who want to make that switch, but maybe there are options or barriers in there. And you see that with all single-use products, it might be that they don't necessarily have the money up front for the reusable nappies, or they don't know enough. There's no education maybe there. So I think it is for local authorities to be providing that. And we have seen that with the baby box. You get that has started in Scotland, and that's a great step forward. But I think that new parents need a little bit more support in how to make those choices and going forward. And we need the infrastructure in place as well to be able to help that, whether that's more access to reusable nappies, or I think it is also just about education as well. And for those parents to be supported, maybe parents don't have access to a tumble dryer, for instance, or don't have big spaces, live in smaller flats where they can't have all nappies drying all the time. There's a lot of barriers in place as to why people can't necessarily make those good choices that we would see as the right choices, but there are barriers in place for people, and we need to find out what they are and make it accessible to everybody.
Great. So obviously, Magnus, Sarah touched there on the issue of the baby box. Obviously, your own company has had a bit of kind of benefit and interaction with the Scottish Government on this. Do you want to just talk through where you guys fit into the baby box that is now kind of winging its way to many new parents across Scotland?
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic thing that the Scottish Government's done, the baby box. It really is. And, we provide a nappy via that baby box, but in the spirit of what we do, in that, we only want these nappies to go to people who really want to try it and who really want to have a go. There's no point in just sticking them in the box and then people are, if they're not interested in it, to me, that's a waste as well, So there is a voucher in there where people can then redeem that voucher with us, and we will send them a small kit of nappies that's enough to last them for roughly a day so they can try it out. It's a very much a newborn size product. It's for newborn babies, and they can try it out and they can actually see how easy it really is, But I agree, a lot of it is about educating and helping people understand what is actually available. And there's some fantastic independent retailers online who can help guide parents through the cloth nappy journey, so to speak, And, the other thing that was important, and I think, you're aware of this, David, because you sat and heard me ranting about it in the factory here before, is this issue of the so-called, in inverted commas, eco-disposable. I mean, what a dreadful thing to say about a disposable product. How can it possibly be environmentally friendly? It really is misleading parents, and that is a bit of a bugbear of mine. We're not, the Nappy Alliance is very much about pro-choice. And what we try and say to people is, look, do as much as you can. You don't have to do this full time. If you can only do it part of the time, then that's a bonus. That's good. That's good for the environment. But what I don't like to see is when parents are hoodwinked into thinking they're doing the right thing, when actually these products they're buying are, in some instances, worse than the regular disposable nappies are for the environment. They represent a contaminant in the recycling streams. They use the same kind of raw materials, really, and they can't be recycled. They're too complex. They've got too many mixed materials in there. So I guess my thoughts are it is about education, and councils and government do have a role to play in that, because we're just small businesses, the reusable nappy world. We don't have the kind of marketing budgets that big corporate companies have. We cannot go on television and tell people about our products. We just don't have the budget for that, So I think it is important that government does support it and supports, it's part of the overall kind of solution for our waste and consumption problem,
Absolutely. And so, I mean, this year, it's hugely important for Scotland in terms of hosting the COP26 summit in Glasgow. Sarah, as we approach this kind of landmark moment in the climate change campaign, what are the kind of key things that Friends of the Earth Scotland are really hoping to come out of the COP26 summit in Glasgow this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing that we want is just some actual action out of this. I think quite often there's conversations around a table, or there's those sort of agreements, but we don't actually see action quick enough. And I think that's what's vital. I mean, we all know that we need to be reducing our climate emissions. That's not new information, but the action that is happening right now isn't going to get us there. So I think we need the world leaders to be more bold and ambitious with what they want. And I think we need to start addressing, I guess, the companies that are causing the most climate change, the climate crisis. I think, it was really worrying a couple of months ago because some of the big oil giants such as BP and Shell were trying to sponsor COP or partner with COP. And those are some of the companies that are really responsible for a huge part of this climate crisis. So we do need to be addressing that. And I think taking a step back, and I think for us, it's most important that the voices of the people who live within the global south are heard, because I think quite often in Scotland, we all know that the climate is changing and we can see bits of that ourselves, but there are people who live in countries right now who can see it every day. Their whole lives have changed. And so for us, the most important thing is that we amplify those voices, and those are heard by the world leaders, and the action that we take is as bold as it can be, because otherwise, we aren't going to get there. And that's a real worry for, I think, everybody right now.
Yeah. And Magnus, final question to you before we finish off is, of course, Reusable Nappy Week. What kind of things are you guys getting up to in TotsBots this week to mark Reusable Nappy Week?
Oh, there's a huge amount of activity, not just with us, but with all the reusable nappy community. As you can imagine, there's promotional discount offers going on. There's a Pass the Nappy campaign. So there's a huge amount of activity. What I'm going to be doing, I'm not going to lie, is stock take. So we're doing some stock taking in the factory, so I get to do that. Lucky me.
Oh, Sarah, Magnus, thank you very much for joining us for this special episode of East End Beers. And if I can say so, I wish you both a very happy Reusable Nappy Week.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Lovely
Thank you so
talking to you.
much.